Welcome to Intune Training, the Steve and Adam Show, with Ben and no Adam. Today we're going to talk about some Microsoft Graph stuff. Ben's super excited. I'm excited. I'm going to break out all my good jokes about Microsoft Excel and Graph and donuts and pies and maybe a little bit of bars.
Maybe we'll see. We'll see how we go. We are trying to get this to be a short video.
Yes.
Yeah. So look, I basically the point of this video is at least 2 to 3 times a week I get a message asking sort of how can I use Graph, or how can I figure out how to use Graph to do the thing that I want to do. So I totally understand the question. It's just that I'm getting so many of them that I figured let's just do a video to show the easiest way to get started with it.
Yeah.
So that if anyone ever asks, we can just point them at this video, because I think it's really important.
I think the thing to call out as well, Ben, is also it's not just for newbies, this video. There's also some new stuff that we've found in PowerShell 7 that may be of interest to people who've been doing Graph and PowerShell for quite some time. So stick around. There's some interesting stuff that we're going to go over as well.
Awesome. All right, let me share my screen and we'll get right into it.
Sweet.
Shared. All right, so we're on the Intune portal, the endpoint.microsoft.com, or Steve's favorite, aka.ms /
Emac.
Yeah, cool, excellent. So the first thing to call out here is that the entire UI of the endpoint portal is using Graph. So it's dogfooding the API that we all use to automate processes as well. So with that in mind, so the first thing that I'll ever tell anyone is sort of how do you figure out how to use Graph? I say go to the endpoint portal. Why is that? Well, we can look at how the endpoint portal uses Graph, and then we can replicate that experience, because if it's good enough for Microsoft, it's good enough for us. So in your favorite browser that has dev tools, so whether that be Microsoft Edge or Chrome, what we can do is we can just press
or Firefox.
Or Firefox. Not that I use Firefox, so I wouldn't know. But in these two browsers, we're going to press F12. And no, that's F11. That's hilarious.
So Ben's still working out the mapping of his new keyboard.
So
bear with him. He's still enjoying that.
Exactly. Okay, so I've just pressed F12. I've just chucked it over to the right-hand side of the screen, and I've gone over to the network tab. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here if you've never really played around with DevTools. I recommend that you take the time to play around with it. It's very cool. But for now, we're just going to go into network. We're going to make sure that we're recording, which we are.
Always by default, it will always say recording.
And we can already start to see that there's some things coming through. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go. So the point of the video is we're going to create a filter. And just sort of understand how that is done. And we're going to do that natively through the UI. So I'm going to go into devices. As the video we did last week points out, you can get to filters almost anywhere, but we're just going to go to devices for now. So I'm going to click on devices, and we can start seeing a whole bunch of stuff coming through, which is really cool. And then I'm going to go into filters. Now I kind of wanted this to bring up a whole bunch of stuff.
You're thinking devices and then doing a filter in there.
Yeah, so let's just click on a couple of things. I just want to show you how much stuff comes up. So we're getting a lot of information, a lot of JavaScript things, a lot of images, a lot of content. This gets kind of messy, and if you're not sure what you're looking for, we want to try and minimize that so we're only seeing the graph calls. So I'm going to go back to home, and I'm going to actually filter on this. I'm going to say filters a lot. It's going to get a little confusing. So I'm just going to click on the filter icon. It brings this up, and I'm just going to type in
the funnel.
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm going to type in graph.microsoft.com. And that just minimizes so that we only get the data that we actually want to look at. All right, so let's go back.
So Ben, I just want to call out quickly, what's the Preflight stuff that I'm seeing there?
The Preflight stuff is interesting. So this is what the UI does just to validate what is available on the calls that it is about to make. So it's essentially saying, hey, I'm about to make a call to, in this case, I can actually make this bigger, I believe. Check this out. Essentially what it's saying is here, it's going to make a call to device management, get role scope, blah, 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 blah. But before it does that, it just wants to make sure that, first of all, it can do a get command. or it can do a post command or whatever it's going to do. The Preflight command actually just tells it that it's valid. It's essentially a live unit test of that endpoint.
Yeah. So what it's actually doing is sending the option command or the option request method, and will return back what you're allowed to do with it.
Yeah.
So in this case, you'll see that it's delete, get, merge, options, post, put, and patch.
Yeah, and then it just
So it
shows
works really well.
what the headers are allowed to be put in, what the max age can be. It's just all the information to validate that what the next command is going to be is correct. So this is, as I said, it's a live unit test of the actual API. So
I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's great as well. And you'll notice that you get a lot of these Preflight commands on every command that you do. All right, so let's clear, and we'll go back in and we'll go through the process again. So we're just going to go to devices.
Yep.
Again, we've got the graph filter on our dev tool, so we'll only see graph calls. We're going to go to filters, and I'm going to create a filter, and we'll just call this test, and Windows 10. We'll put some information in here. Steve is
awesome.
Ooh.
There's no emojis, so it couldn't have been me.
Yeah, that's fine. We can do that. There you go.
There we go.
All right. We're going to create a filter. We'll just go device ownership equals corporate. At this point, it literally doesn't matter. So we're just creating a very simple filter here. I'm going to click next. We're not going to put any scope tags. We'll review and create. And then just pay attention over on the right-hand side. So when I hit create, we get two commands.
Now creates two calls.
So the first one is so we can see that this is correct. Let me zoom in on this. So we can see that this assignment filter is the one that actually posted the command, because we get a 201 status. So 201 essentially means that the post returned a success. Happy days. That's all you need to know. 201 is a good thing because it returns that the post that we sent through to Graph came back with value. Generally, you don't actually get a result back. So then the next thing that happens is the UI then does a get request on assignment filters. As you can see here, even without sort of digging into it, we're just looking for the top 50. We're ordering by display name, things like that. It's pretty simple stuff, but just to show
straightforward.
Exactly.
So Ben, if we click onto that assignment filter thing, what do we see?
Yeah, so this is sort of what we're getting at here. So this is how a filter is created, right? With this API that we can see here. But knowing what the endpoint is only half the battle. We then need to know actually how to sort of craft the request properly. So what we can do is we can click into this and we can look at the headers and we can look at the response and all that sort of stuff to actually get an idea of how this is formed. So we've got our response headers. That's fine. I'm not super interested in that. I'm more interested in the request headers. So these are the things that we send to the endpoint to make that authentication and do the thing. So this huge block of text is our authorization. So that's just the token that says that we're allowed to be here and allowed to do the things that we do. We can talk about that at length, and we'll probably always continue to talk about how to authenticate.
And we'll probably dive into that later in the session.
Exactly. So these are the headers that just tell us, what we're about to be doing and what we're sending. And then finally, we've got the request payloads. We've got the description. We've got that awesome emoji content. We've got the display name, the platform, the role scope, which is obviously nothing because we didn't put any in. And then we've got the actual rule that we defined, which is device ownership equals corporate. So the point here is that we're essentially creating a JSON string, and we're posting it with the correct authentication. It is very simple if you sort of understand that all we're doing is forming a request, posting it with our authentication token, and then as long as we get a 201 response back, we've created that thing. So now that we've looked at the dev tools and we sort of understand, okay, so that's how it's done, what's the next step? Now, there's a bunch of different ways that you can actually replicate this experience, but in the dev tools, and I know this for a fact in Chrome and Edge, potentially also Firefox, what you can do is you can right click on the command that you want, copy as PowerShell. Now, if you notice, we've got a whole bunch of different other options. So if PowerShell isn't your flavor, you can choose a different language, but I like PowerShell, so that's what we're going to do. So I'm just going to do that again.
So PowerShell all the way.
PowerShell all the way. And then we're just going to open up VS Code, and I'm going to paste this in. So this is messy because it's formatted code, and it's maybe not the best way to do it, but it shows you the essential concept of.
It's a starting point.
Exactly, it's a starting point. Now, all these backticks, I hate them; they're awful. But let's get past that, and I'll show you how I do a request after this. So what we've got here is we're doing an invoke web request. So this is exactly the same as just going to this URL with this information in the header. So we've got device management, assignment filters. So that's the endpoint we're talking with. We're posting content to this endpoint. We're generating our headers.
Yep.
So we've got a whole bunch of information here that is generated primarily by the browser. So like the information like the user agent and all that sort of stuff. This is generated by the browser that we're using and sent back. So we don't actually need most of this. So let's just go through and get rid of the stuff that we actually don't need. Just go in here. Don't need that. Don't need this. We only need one line in our header, and this is that huge authentication token. So we've got authorization, it's a bearer token, and then this massive thing. We can copy this, we can put it into a viewer and sort of see what the scope is, but this is just generated based on our authentication into endpoint, and it is, it gives us the access that we need, so that's cool. We've got the content type is application/JSON. This is just telling the endpoint that what we're sending them is a JSON payload, so that we don't need to stress too much about what's happening. And then we've got the body. So this is the actual JSON payload that we'll be sending. What's actually really cool here, Steve, is that because we put emojis in, we've got system.text.encoding, and it's doing all the char set stuff. Which, yeah, that's very, very cool. So if we dig through this, so we've got all the information we saw in the actual dev tools, but in a body format. So we've got the description, we've got the platform, we've got the rule, and the rule is really simple. As we said before, it's device.device ownership equals, and then corporate, and then no role scope tag. So once you sort of do this to a couple of endpoints, this is how you start understanding, okay, so it's relatively simple. All I really need to do now is figure out the best way to authenticate and figure out exactly how the body is supposed to look. And then once you've got that concept down, you can start expanding this to do what you need programmatically. So yeah, I just thought that was really important to point out.
So Ben, I'd be interested to know, can I just run this once I've copied it straight out of Chrome?
Yes, 100%. Let me go in and I'll delete the.
How about we just do a get?
Oh, just a get? Well, I'd need to get the other command. Let me just delete this and we'll create it from scratch.
Okay.
Okay, so that's been deleted. Let's run this again. I'm gonna F8 this whole thing, and then yeah, it's just F8, and that's gone through. What was the content we got? A 201, which is exactly what we expected. If we go back into our portal, full screen this bad boy, and refresh it.
And we should have the test.
We've got test. So that's come through. So like it's, what we copied from the dev tools is exactly what is happening in the browser. So that makes sense to me that would run.
Does that mean that I can then just copy that and put it into my automation scripts and it'll just work? And leave it there permanently?
It will, until that bearer token expires in 5 to 10 minutes. So the short answer is no. This is a great way to look at how you would initially form a request to graph. It is not the be all and end all. What I would be suggesting is, this is broken down into each parameter is on its own line so that we can sort of understand how it's all formed, but this is not the best way to do things. So do we want to pop over to another example where we actually show how to do this properly?
Yeah, let's look at the one that we prepared earlier, because I think it's a lot of value in it for the for people watching.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let me just clear this out. Okay, so I'm going to pop over to one we created earlier. So the primary difference between this one and this one is that I've formed this in the way that I would send a request to Graph. It is exactly the same. The actual endpoint that we're doing is different, but that kind of doesn't matter. The process is the same. We're not doing a post, so we don't have a body in the parameter or the sort of the payload that we're sending, but we could potentially show that. The important thing that we're pointing out here is where we've got this hard-coded authentication token, so our bearer token here, we're actually going to request one. And we're using the msal.ps module that is available on the PowerShell gallery just as a starting block, because it does all of the authentication stuff for us, so that we don't need to understand how it works. It just works.
Yep.
Right. we're using the well-known application ID for Intune, which has been thoroughly spoken about on our channel, and is the sort of the basis of all the sample code that you would find in GitHub. Yep. As our point of access into the environment, because it has all the endpoint access or all the Graph API access that we need. We're then simply just saying, okay, so we're going to get the MSAL token with this client ID. Our tenant ID is going to be intune.training, or the tenant GUID.
GUID
Really doesn't matter.
Or the on Microsoft.
Yeah, exactly. It all resolves to the same thing. And then this part's important. So it's worth pointing out that everything that I'm doing at the moment is on PowerShell 7.1. Yes. Now, MSAL and PowerShell 5 work together, but you need to make sure that the application registration that you make for AEAD is formatted in a correct way. So I'm gonna flip the script a little bit. I'm gonna change this to interactive. I just want to show you what happens. So this well-known application is not designed for MSAL. It works for MSAL, but it doesn't interactively work the way that we expect it to. So if I put this in here and I go interactive, and I press F8 to run this line.
So the one thing while that's going through,
well, it's going to take a second. So I'm just going to authenticate here.
You'll see on the invoke web request. Go ahead.
So you can see here it's failed, right? And it's failed because the reply URL is not correct. It's essentially because it's the application needs to be registered with a specific reply URL, which in this case is https://localhost. That's all that needs to be done. It's just not done for this particular application, so it will not work in PowerShell 7. So we get around that by changing it to device flow. I do need to actually just reload my thing because this is waiting for a response. I think that's right. 1 second. So sorry, Steve, what were you bringing up?
What I was going to call out is we're going to be using, so in the invoke-rest method, you'll see in the parameter splat that we've got there, we're using authentication equals OAuth and token equals secure token.
This is new and shiny.
Exist in PowerShell 7. And I'll call that out and call it out loud. If you're going to play around with this, make sure you're running PowerShell 7.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, I'd not actually played around with these new parameters at all. I'd just been doing it the way that I've always been doing it, which is creating the header myself. But this is definitely another way to do it. It doesn't particularly save in like text that you need to type, but it is formatted better, so you don't need to worry about fat fingering the headers, which is cool. Okay, so we saw what happens with an application that's not been created for MSAL. So let's go and fix that now. So we've changed the method of authentication to device code, and I'm just going to run this line. And if we look down at the command, we can see here, so to sign in, use a web browser to open the page and enter the code. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to go here. This brings up our authentication. Is it going to bring it up? Probably not. Here it is.
Yep, there you go.
I'm going to paste this in here. And then I'm going to log in. Hi, yup. Yes. And that's done. If we pop back to our VS Code, give that a second.
Come through in a second.
And that is done. So we can now actually look at what we've got in there. If we go token equals, and I'll bring this up a little bit. So we can see all of the information that has been generated from that. And really all we care about is the access token. So then if we go
if you scroll down a little bit before we continue on, Ben, what you'll see here as well is the expires on and extended expires on. So if you're building a script and you're wanting to handle this, this is how you can check to make sure your token's still valid or not.
That's correct, yeah.
You just attach that to your token.
That's right. So cool, that's done. We've got our authentication, so we now know that we've got the access that we need. So we just need to format this this result into a way that we can then send it through to our GraphQL. So in the example that Steve's just showed me today, so we go into we're creating a new variable called secure token, and we're just getting this giant wall of text, and we're converting it to a secure string.
So it's converting it to another giant wall of text.
Yeah, exactly. So once it's now a secure string, which is what this token parameter is expecting, we're essentially saying that we're going to get content from graph.microsoft.com beta/me using an OAuth authentication token of secure token, and the content type that we are expecting to get back or to send, depending on what the method is going to be application/JSON.
Yep.
So that's it. So if I format this and I run it, we'll go F7. That's done immediately, and we've got all this information about me. So my user principal name, my location, all that sort of fun information. So this is how I would then generate the request once I've sort of figured out how the endpoint works by analyzing it from the UI using the dev tools. I would understand how the body is formed, what the URI looks like, and then I would just handle my authentication myself with these 2 lines of code, and then I would generate the request just using this splatting method or hash table inputs, because it looks neater. It's much easier to read, and then you can sort of automate the processes that you want from here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Ben.
Nice.
So I think that pretty much covers off the whole session that we were planning to go through.
Yeah.
And I really hope that other people find this useful, because look, this stuff with PowerShell 7 where you can do the authentication, you now get to the point where you have 1 line, 2 lines, to get the auth token. The thing to call out as well is the Get-MsalToken is part of the msal.ps module, Ben?
That's correct. Yeah. And you can get this from the PowerShell gallery now. It works in PowerShell 7. It also works in PowerShell 5. One of the cool things about if you're going to continue to use PowerShell 5 for your production code, you can actually change this to interactive, and it is going to work, and it's going to bring back that data, because with PowerShell 5, it's still, it just works with the interactive code flow. So, this stuff still works. You don't have to use 7. But if you're not using PowerShell 7, then in your REST method or your web request, you cannot use this authentication token method. You need to handle
have to build the body,
exactly,
the header itself,
which isn't hard, but it's just a thing to call out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's it. My recommendation
Awesome.
here is to get onto the endpoint.microsoft.com, open up the dev tools, and really just dig in and see how everything works, because nothing's hidden. It's all behind that layer. Just under the surface, you can see how all the graph calls are made, and you too can start automating processes.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. I think that was fantastic, and let's wrap it up there.
Definitely, man.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone. And obviously reach out and let us know if there's anything you'd like us to look at.
Definitely.